What's going on, baseball fans? How you doing? So here are my postseason predictions, and most likely, every single one of them are going to be wrong. Let's go talk about it. Before I get started, if you are new to the channel, think about subscribing down below. Hit the like button, the bell button, the share button, hit all the buttons. And sponsoring today's video, we have SeatGeek. Use my code HYDE and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. And also sponsoring today's video, we have Prize Picks. If you're into the sports betting game, go check out Prize Picks. You play the over-unders instead of against other people. Use my code GINGER and you'll get a 100% deposit match. Let's start off in the wild card round and talk about the Blue Jays and the Mariners. I think this is going to be a really fun matchup. Both teams have had some good off seasons going back the last couple of years. Two good teams coming together in the wild card round. Let's talk about the offenses. I love the Mariners offense. Julio Rodriguez has had an awesome rookie season. Ty France has been pretty solid this year. Mitch Haniger hasn't played all that much, did miss some time, but he's been pretty good lately. Eugenio Suarez has been a nice pickup, 31 home runs. Carlos Santana has been a decent pickup as well. Kyle Riley, 27 home runs on the year. Jared Kelenic, hey man, this guy was definitely struggling early on in his career, but he came up recently and he's doing a lot better now. Overall, I think the Mariners offense is really solid, but I got to give the nod to the Blue Jays. This Blue Jays offense is just hellacious. Springer, Bichette, Vlad Jr., sure, he took a step back from last year, but still having a really good season. Alejandro Kirk having himself a breakout year, having a 372 average with a 372 on base and hitting 285 overall. Teoscar Hernandez, he's been underrated. Max Chapman, 27 home runs, playing some good defense. They got 5 guys here with at least 24 home runs. I mean, that's a lot of meat in that lineup. And taking a look at the numbers overall, the Toronto Blue Jays, they rank 2nd in WRC+, while the Mariners rank 8th. So I'm going to give the nod to the Toronto Blue Jays here when it comes to the offense. Let's take a look at the pitching. I do love me some Seattle Mariners starting pitching. Love the Luis Castillo move. Robbie Ray has been great lately. Very solid signing from the offseason. You got a couple of young guys, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby. But with the Blue Jays, they also have some good starting pitching as well. Alek Manoah has been really good. Kevin Gausman has been a great pickup for them. Ross Stripling is as steady as they come. Very underrated this year. Jose Barrios, sure, a down year, but has shown some glimpses of being really solid. I think he can contribute in this postseason. And when it comes to the bullpens, Toronto, they've had a better bullpen in the second half. And when you take a look at the numbers overall, Toronto, overall, I would say both bullpens are pretty even. Toronto right now in the last 30 days, 15th in Fangraph WAR when it comes to the relief pitching, and Seattle 16th overall. I think in the end, I like the Blue Jays just a little bit better than the Mariners here. I like this Mariners team. I think it's really fun. But I think the Blue Jays, they have a ton of offense here. They have starting pitching, especially in a short series. I love the Mariners pitching here. I mean, a 5-man rotation like this is really good, but when it comes to a 3-game series, I like Kevin Gausman. I like Alek Manoah. I think Ross Stripling is very underrated, having a good year this year. And I think Jose Barrios can contribute as well. He can come out of the bullpen. I just think in the end, the Blue Jays, they have a bit more firepower than the Mariners for a 3-game series. I think the Blue Jays are built better for a short series than the Mariners. I think the Mariners would be better off in a 5 or a 7-game series, but in the end, I think the Blue Jays find a way to get by the Mariners in the wild card round. Up next, we have the Cleveland Guardians and the Tampa Bay Rays. The Guardians have been absolutely fantastic. Taking a look here, 21-8 in the month of September. Who would have thought they would have won the division, especially with how good that White Sox team was looking coming into this year? Really like this Cleveland Guardians team. The offense, sure, it's not the best offense overall. I would say it's pretty middle of the road, but I like the variety they have in this lineup. You got someone like a Jose Ramirez, who's an MVP caliber kind of a player. Andres Jimenez has really stepped up this year. Overall, just a complete player this year, both offensively and defensively. Andres Jimenez, very underrated to me. Even someone like an Oscar Gonzalez has really contributed, hitting 296 over 382 plate appearances with a 461 slugging, really solid. Josh Naylor's got 20 homers. Stephen Kwan, an on-base machine at the top of the lineup. Really like this lineup with the Cleveland Guardians. Again, it's not the best lineup out there, but I just like it. I just like that they all can do different things. I think it's a pretty underrated lineup. Now, when it comes to Tampa Bay, they've had a lot of injuries this year, but they still look really solid. Someone like a Randy Arozarena, I feel like he disappointed a little this year. I mean, yeah, sure, 20 homers and 32 stolen bases. but I would have liked to have seen a bit of a better on base, maybe a bit of a better slugging, but I don't want to say he's disappointing. I just expected a little bit more out of Randy Arozarena. Now, Yandy Diaz has been just the star of the show here for this lineup. Sure, not a lot of homers, but over a 400 on base. Very good. Wander Franco did miss some time this year, but he's come back recently and he's been hitting really well. Other than that, I'm not seeing a whole lot in this lineup for the Tampa Bay Rays, so I'll give the edge to Cleveland when it comes to the offense. And let's take a look at the starting pitching. This is where the Rays, they get a little bit better here. You just got back Tyler Glasnow. I think he could end up being a bit of a dark horse in this postseason, but Shane McClanahan's had a really good year. Corey Kluber, for the most part, has been solid. And then you got someone like a Jeffrey Springs, who I think has been underrated this year with a 2.46 ERA. Drew Rasmussen as well. That's an underrated guy, a 2.84 ERA over 28 starts. I like the Rays starting pitching here. And when it comes to the Cleveland Guardians, now, I think the Rays have a bit more length with the starting pitching, but I really like Shane Bieber and Tristan McKenzie at the top there, and I think Cal Quantrill is really solid as well. Shane Bieber's had I keep using the word underrated, but I feel like Shane Bieber's been pretty overlooked this year. He's had a really good season, 31 starts, 200 innings, a 2.88 ERA, 198 strikeouts over the 200 innings. Tristan McKenzie, very good season. I mean, my goodness, a 2.96 ERA over the 30 starts. Cal Quantrill, he's been giving you innings. I like that you got three guys here that have given you a ton of innings. You can rely on these three guys. Overall, I do like the Rays starting pitching, but I think Cleveland matches up with them pretty well. But where I think Cleveland just blows away the Tampa Bay Rays, which is pretty funny considering the Rays have had a good bullpen. You know, when you think of the Rays, you always think of a good bullpen, but the Guardians bullpen this year has just been absolutely nasty. Emmanuel Clase, man, 42 saves, a 1.36 ERA, one of the top relievers in the game. James Karinchak, very solid in the setup role. You just got a lot of guys in here that are just shutting you down. And if you take a look at the numbers overall, Cleveland has the second best bullpen over the last month. And when overall, they have the fourth best bullpen in Major League Baseball on the year. I really like Cleveland. They're hot. They're pitching well, both in the rotation and in the bullpen. I like the offense. I like the variety. I just feel like the Rays, they're just not exciting me this year. Overall, I like the Guardians better, and I think they find a way to move on and go play the Yankees in the division round. Let's move on to the National League. Let's talk about the Mets and the Padres. Man, oh man, this is a fun series. You got some star-studded players in this series, both on the Mets and on the Padres. Let's take a look at the offenses first. When it comes to the Mets, really like the Mets offense. Francisco Lindor has been very underrated this year. I know I keep saying that word, but Francisco Lindor, I mean, look at the year that he's having, hitting 270, a 339 on base, 449 slugging, 26 homers, playing some great defense out there as well. Jeff McNeil winning the batting title, hitting 326 with a 382 on base. Pete Alonso with 40 homers. Eduardo Escobar has been contributing. Mark Kahn has been contributing. Really like this lineup. Sure, Starling Marte in here would be very nice, but they have been hitting pretty well over the last month. If you take a look here, first in WRC Plus over the last month, even without Starling Marte. So I think they are going to find a way to just keep the offense going here. And with the Padres, I like their offense. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with it. But overall, it's funny with the Padres where you got some guys in this lineup, but overall in the year, they're 13th overall in offense on the year. And if we take a look at the offense as of late, 12th overall, you got some good bats in here. You know, you got a Juan Soto, you got Manny Machado, who could get some MVP votes, Jake Cronenworth, or Brandon Drury. I don't know what it is, though. So other guys are just not really stepping up as much. I like the Mets lineup when it comes to the length a little bit better. The Padres got some boppers in here, but when it comes to the full, 9-guy lineup, I just like the Mets a little bit better than the Padres. Now, what this is going to come down to, I think, is starting pitching. Let's take a look at the starting pitching here. Yu Darvish, he's always been good against the Mets. Blake Snell has been very hot lately. Joe Musgrove has been solid lately. Sean Manaea, kind of a down year in his first year with the Padres. But with the New York Mets, the story of the Mets is you got DeGrom and Scherzer at the top of the rotation. This is what you brought Scherzer in for the postseason to match up with the Jacob DeGrom. You also brought in a Chris Bassett. You got Carrasco here in the 3 and 4 spots. Don't forget about a Taijuan Walker. Now, the bullpens, I'd say overall the bullpens are pretty close. I like the Mets bullpen. I don't know if that's the Trumpets. I'm not sure. But Edwin Diaz is just absolutely nasty in the closer role. This guy has just completely figured it out. Josh Hader has been good lately. But to me, I'm handing the ball to Edwin Diaz any day of the week. Adam Ottavino has had a solid year, pretty overlooked. You got some other guys in this bullpen that are doing well. And with the Padres, again, Josh Hader has been pitching well, but you never know with Josh Hader, could he slip back into some of those bad ways that he was having when he first came over to the Padres? And you got some other guys in here as well. But overall, when it comes to shut down guys in the bullpens, I just like the Mets better. I love Edwin Diaz at the end of those games. When that guy comes in, it just feels like it's game over at that point. Overall, when it comes to the Mets and the Padres, I think the top heaviness of the starting pitching for the New York Mets is going to prevail. I think they have enough offense here. I think the Padres are good, but in the end, I think in a 3-game series, with Scherzer and DeGrom, you got a shutdown guy like Diaz. You got enough offense in there, even without Starling Marte. I think the Mets find a way to get past the Padres, and they move on to face the Dodgers in the division round. And last but not least, in the wild card round, we got the Cardinals and the Phillies. I think this is a pretty intriguing matchup. Both teams, I think, bring a lot to the table. Let's start off with the St. Louis Cardinals here. Really like the St. Louis Cardinals. They were my preseason pick coming into this season, and this offense has been very good all year. Taking a look, 5th in WRC plus on the year. Paul Goldschmidt having an MVP caliber season. Nolan Arenado also having an MVP caliber season. Goldschmidt has been the better offensive player. I mean, look at these numbers that Goldschmidt's putting up. Hitting .317 with a .404 on base, a .578 slugging. Arenado, very solid numbers as well, but one of the best defensive players in the game. Really liked Brendan Donovan this year with a .394 on base, hitting .291. That's really solid out of the leadoff spot. But how can we, move on without talking about Albert Pujols? I mean, this guy has been phenomenal as the DH for the Cardinals this year, setting some history this year, getting over 700 home runs, hitting .270 on the year, though, with a .345 on base and a .550 slugging. Sure, the home runs are fun, but this guy's just having a really good season. Now, the problem that I'm having with the St. Louis Cardinals just a little bit is how they've been performing lately. St. Louis, they're 17th in WRC plus over the last 30 days. And when you take a look, Albert Pujols has been pretty much all of their offense over the last month. Brendan Donovan's been pretty good too. But Pujols, I mean, look at the numbers that he's putting up over the last month. 25 RBIs. The next guy up is Nolan Arenado with 14 over the last month. They got to get some of these other guys stepping up. Arenado, Goldschmidt, we got to get these slash lines going a little bit more here. Pujols, you can't lean on Pujols for everything. Sure, it was a fun ride getting over the 700 homers, but we got to get some of these other guys stepping up. Tyler O'Neill, he's been okay with a 122 WRC plus, but I don't like the slash line very much. The on base is fine, a 355 on base, but I want to see him hitting more, driving in some more runs. So I think the key for the Cardinals here is they got to get these other guys stepping up in the lineups. And when it comes to the Phillies, really like the Phillies lineup. Bryce Harper has been pretty cold lately, but Kyle Schwarber, man, he has just been demolishing baseballs this year with 46 home runs. Are you kidding me? I mean, we're talking about Aaron Judge all year with home runs, but Kyle Schwarber, I feel like, has just been forgotten about. He has just had a really monster season. 46 homers, that's incredible. Rhys Hoskins has been really good too. 30 homers, a 332 on base. Alec Boehm, he got off to a bit of a slow start there, but in the end hit 280 on the year. Nick Castellanos has been a bit of a disappointment. You'd like for him to really pick it up in the playoffs if he can. Overall, I think both offenses, I'd say they're pretty even for the most part. Both teams have some players that are a little cold. I think the Cardinals and the Phillies, they definitely could put up a lot of runs, but it's going to come down to the pitching here with the Cardinals and the Phillies. Now, both teams, I really like their starting pitching. Aaron Nola, we got Zach Wheeler. You ended up getting Noah Syndergaard. Bailey Falter has had some pretty good moments this year down the stretch. He ended up taking over for Noah Syndergaard in the rotation at one point. Ranger Suarez will get the Game 3 nod if it does go to a Game 3. But overall, the Phillies, I think they're set up pretty well for a short series here with Nola and Wheeler. Really like that. But when it comes to the St. Louis Cardinals starting pitching, now, it's not flashy by any means, but I just love the way they work together as a team. The Cardinals pitching, when you look at someone like an Adam Wainwright, a Miles Michaelis has actually been really good this year. I think he's been pretty underrated. Jose Quintana, I think, was a pretty nice pickup for them. Jordan Montgomery, he's had some pretty good moments with the Cardinals since coming over from the Yankees. But with the Cardinals, again, you're not going to get a lot of flashiness. You're not going to get a lot of strikeouts, velocity, stuff like that. The Cardinals, they work really well with their defense. Third overall in defense on the year, 70 defensive runs saved. That's one of the better teams in the major leagues when it comes to saving runs. In the end, I think with this Phillies and Cardinals matchup, I think they're pretty close. So what I think this is going to come down to are the bullpens. When you look at the Cardinals bullpen and the Phillies over the last 30 days are 12th overall in relief pitching. I don't like that ERA, though. A 5.00 ERA, a 3.48 FIP. Now, the FIP definitely looks better, but that ERA of 5 out of that bullpen, and the big reason for that is the defense. I just think the Phillies defense, I think it really could hold them back in this series. I think the Cardinals are just a better fundamental team. Now, when you take a look at the Cardinals, sure, a 4.03 FIP, but the ERA at 3.28, when you have the defense like that, the Cardinals, sure, they're not going to look very pretty when it comes to their pitching rankings on Fangraphs, but that's not really their game. They're not looking for tons of strikeouts. They really rely on the defense out there when it comes to the pitching. I think in the end, the Cardinals, they're just going to be the better fundamental team. I think they're just going to play a better brand of baseball than the Phillies. I think the Phillies definitely got star power. You got guys in the lineup and the rotation. I just think the Cardinals, they're just going to play some good baseball, and I think they find a way to move past the Phillies, and they'll go play the Braves in the division round. Let's move on to the division round and talk the Astros and the Blue Jays. My goodness, what a matchup this would be. Tons of offense, good pitching. Would love to see this matchup. The Blue Jays, I think they have an offense that can match up with the Astros offense. We talked about the Blue Jays earlier. We know what kind of bats they got, but the Astros got bats as well. Jose Altuve, I think an underrated season. I haven't heard anything about Jose Altuve this year. Hitting 300 with the 387 on base, 28 homers, 18 stolen bases. Jeremy Pena, more defense from him, but he's been hitting a little bit as well, 22 homers. Yordan Alvarez has just been smashing the ball. Alex Bregman, he's had a really good season this year overall. Kyle Tucker, another underrated season for him. No one ever talks about Kyle Tucker. You got bats all over the place. Even Trey Mancini has come over and contributed as well. Now, when it comes to the starting pitching, obviously with the Astros, you know what you're getting with starting pitching. It's going to be very good. Justin Verlander, probably going to win the Cy Young. Framber Valdez behind him. That's a good 1-2 punch right there. And then you got some other guys here. Christian Javier can go for a game 3. You could have Lance McCullers Jr. get in the mix. Luis Garcia as well. Maybe somewhere a Jose Urquidy. But a lot of starting pitching for the Houston Astros. And we mentioned earlier with the Toronto Blue Jays, they got some good starting pitching as well. I would say the Astros are a bit deeper when it comes to the starting pitching. But here's where I think the Blue Jays match up really well with the Houston Astros. Let's say we have a game 1 scenario. We got Justin Verlander against Kevin Gausman. Now, Justin Verlander, obviously very good this year. I'm looking at the matchups, though. He leans very heavily, fastball, slider. If we could take a look here at the batted ball statistics when it comes to pitch value, offense against certain pitches. Taking a look here, the Toronto Blue Jays, they're very good against hitting the fastballs this year, as is Houston, also very good at hitting fastballs. But Justin Verlander, his secondary pitch is a slider. Taking a look at how the Blue Jays do against sliders. 3rd overall against sliders this year. Kevin Gausman, he leans very heavily on a split finger. Taking a look at where the Astros rank at hitting split fingers. 21st overall. I'm just saying, if this is the matchup, Kevin Gausman and a Justin Verlander, hey, I think Kevin Gausman, I'm not saying Gausman would beat Verlander, head-to-head here, but I think Gausman absolutely has a chance to go toe-to-toe with this guy and give his team absolutely a chance to win. How about Framber Valdez and an Alek Manoah going in a Game 2 situation? Framber Valdez, a very good year this year. With Framber Valdez, he leans very heavily on a sinker and a curveball. Taking a look at how the Blue Jays do against curveballs. The Blue Jays this year, 5th overall against curveballs, while Alek Manoah, his secondary pitch is more of a slider. Taking a look at how the Astros do against sliders, 14th overall, they're in the negative. So I'm just saying here, I think the Blue Jays, sure, Verlander, Valdez, they look pretty good for a 1-2 punch, but Gausman and Manoah, they're pretty good too, and I think they match up really well with the Astros. Another thing with the Astros and the Blue Jays, their bullpens. Now, the Astros bullpen has been really solid this year and doing very well over the last 30 days. But taking a look at Toronto's bullpen, they're 15th overall. They have been getting worked very heavily. They've had, guys like Jose Barrios, they've been getting knocked around a little bit. But I think with Toronto, I think when you're leaning on Gausman and Manoah and then, someone like a Stripling for a game 3, I think that's going to take a little pressure off of this bullpen, and I think they're going to be able to settle back down. Because if you look here, 117 and 2/3 innings over the last 30 days. That's a lot of innings out of that bullpen over a 30-day span. I think Toronto, they're going to lean on this starting pitching a little bit more, and they're going to be able to give this bullpen a bit more of a rest here. So, in the end, I think Toronto, they match up really well with the Astros offense. I mean, both offenses are extremely good. Starting pitching, I'd say it's pretty even overall when you're looking at the Astros starting pitching here. I mean, obviously it's very good, but the Blue Jays, they're very good too. And I think the Blue Jays bullpen, they're going to step up in this postseason. And you know what? I'm going with an upset here. I'm going Blue Jays over the Astros. I say the Blue Jays advance to the championship series. Moving on to the Guardians and the Yankees. I've already talked about the Guardians, so let's go talk about the Yankees a little bit. With the Yankees, obviously, you got bats for days here. Aaron Judge, a phenomenal season this year, breaking the record in the American League. But besides Aaron Judge, we got some other guys really stepping up as of late. Gleyber Torres, Oswaldo Cabrera, they've been really helping out in this lineup. Harrison Bader, I feel like, has brought some energy to this team. We already mentioned Gleyber Torres. Giancarlo Stanton, he's been hitting a lot of home runs as of late. You got some guys in this Yankees lineup that I think are going to give the Cleveland Guardians a pretty tough time. Now, when it comes to the starting pitching, solid starting pitching for the Yankees. But one guy I do want to focus on here is Nestor Cortes. He has actually been really good this year. A 2.44 ERA, a 3.13 FIP. And if we take a look here at the Yankees starting pitching over the last 30 days, 11th overall. So they've definitely been improving there. Frankie Montas, you're probably not going to see him at all. Who knows if you're going to see him in this postseason at all. But Nestor Cortes has been leading the way for the Yankees pitching rotation as of late. Now, one guy, though, that I'm really concerned about, I don't want to say really concerned, but one guy I'm intrigued about is Garrett Cole. He has not been as sharp as you would want him to be going into the postseason. Sure, his last start against Texas was pretty good. 6 hits over 6 innings, 2 earned, did strike out 9. But he had 3 starts there where he gave up 4 runs in each of them. Against Toronto, 3 runs in 6 1/3. Did pick up the win there, but he hasn't had a game score in the 80s ever since August 9th. I mean, this is a guy where you want this guy to be coming in and just shutting it down. He just hasn't been doing that as of late. So I wonder what Garrett Cole is going to bring to the table for the Yankees. But speaking of the starting pitching, let's go back to the Guardians here. Most likely for game 1, I would imagine you're going to see Shane Bieber, Tristan McKenzie, probably a game 2. Maybe you can go Cal Quantrill. McKenzie, Quantrill, those guys will go 2 and 3. Which ones? I'm not quite sure. But Cal Quantrill and Shane Bieber, there's one thing I want to point out with these two guys. Both guys utilize a cutter. Now, Shane Bieber doesn't throw it as much as Cal Quantrill. Bieber throws it around 16% of the time, while Quantrill throws it 36% of the time. With Quantrill, though, I also want to point this out, throws a good amount of sinkers, and the Guardians have a very, very good defense. If we take a look here, the Yankees have the best defense in the game this year. I'm not sure if anyone realizes that, but the Guardians, a very good defense this year, and that infield has been really solid this year. 77 defensive runs saved among the entire team, a 36.4 UZR. That's actually very good. That actually ranks number 2 overall, just behind the St. Louis Cardinals. The Guardians, I think, they're going to play this Yankee team really well, an analytical organization. I think they're going to exploit these things, especially with trying to get some ground balls here and take advantage of that. But getting back to the cutter, again, Shane Bieber, I think he's going to have to come at the Yankees with more cutters here because the Yankees are a good fastball hitting team, and they also hit sliders really well. So if Bieber comes at them with more cutters, I think that's going to end up being a good thing. And here is why. Because the Yankees have not hit cutters well this year. 20th overall on the year, and in the last 30 days, 27th overall. So I think if Bieber can come at them with some cutters, a little heavier on the cutters, mix and match those pitches a little bit more instead of just going fastball slider, and Quantrill as well, he already throws a ton of them as it is, I think that could end up being a problem for the Yankees. With Garrett Cole, I'm not sure what you're going to get with a Garrett Cole here. Nestor Cortes, again, he's been really good lately, but really being, in a postseason environment, I think he'll end up doing fine. But I think the Guardians here, when it comes to starting pitching, it looks like the Yankees would be a lot better on the surface. But I think if the Guardians can come into this series and execute a game plan, I think they could be pretty tough to beat when it comes to their starting pitching. But then you could look at the bullpens here. The bullpens, we already talked about the bullpens here with the Guardians. My goodness, that's a shutdown bullpen. You got arms for days in there. An extremely good bullpen. Second overall over the last 30 days. Fourth overall on the year. The Yankees have had a good bullpen too, but they've had some injuries as of late. So I think in the end, Cleveland, I think you got to give them the advantage with the relief pitching here. And I think with Cleveland, they got guys that can hit, man. They got guys. You know, I talked about this offense earlier. It's not the most amazing lineup, but I think that these guys can do different things. I think they can give this Yankees pitching a bit of a tough time. And in the end, I think the Guardians, they play some good defense, just like the Yankees. I think the Guardians match up really well with the Yankees here. And you know what? I'm going with another upset here. I'm going Guardians over the Yankees. So for the American League Championship Series, I got the Blue Jays and the Guardians. Who saw that one coming? Up next, we have the Dodgers and the Mets. Oh my, what a matchup this would be. We've already talked about the Mets a little bit, so let's dive into the Dodgers. What a team this year for the LA Dodgers. My goodness, this offense is just completely nutty. You got Mookie Betts, Turner, Freeman in the 1-2-3 spot. Are you kidding me? But they got some other guys here that have been doing really well. Justin Turner, he's had himself a pretty decent season, hitting .278 with a .350 on base. Not too bad if you ask me. Gavin Luxey stepped up this year with a .346 on base. Chris Taylor, he's not the Chris Taylor that he was last year, but this is a guy that's always going to be able to offer you that versatility, can move around. Cody Bellinger, who knows what kind of a Cody Bellinger you're going to get in the postseason. This is a guy, he had 19 home runs this year. Can he come up with a couple of big hits? He did last postseason. We're going to have to wait and see. But overall, this offense with the Dodgers is just fantastic. Number one overall on the year. And as of late, they've been hitting pretty well too. 10th overall in WRC plus over the last month. And compared to the Mets, now, the Mets over the last month, again, we talked about this earlier, Starling Marte has been out, but they've still been producing pretty well with the offense. So I like both of these offenses. I think you definitely maybe got to lean towards the Dodgers here. Obviously, when you got these three guys at the top of the lineup, you got some pretty decent pieces down here as well. Not a bad lineup at all. But the Mets, I think they're going to be able to get some runs across the board, obviously, and that's where it comes to the pitching. Now, I have been on the record of saying with the Dodgers starting pitching, they are 4th overall. Now, they have been producing with a 2.75 ERA shows that. When it comes to the FIP, a 3.59. That's not bad by any means, but when it comes to postseason pitching, this Dodgers rotation, I'm wondering what they're going to be able to do in the postseason. Now, I love what Tyler Anderson has done this year, but when it comes to his performance against good teams, let's see how he can do, against a team like the Mets with this offense. Tony Gonsolin, he's a little unproven in the postseason, a very good regular season. What are you going to get out of him? Urias has been really good this year, a 2.16 ERA over the 175 innings. Clayton Kershaw, when healthy, he's been good. To me, when it comes to the postseason, I'm leaning DeGrom, Scherzer here. These are two just top guys here in games 1 and 2. That's pretty tough, man. And then you got Bassett, Carrasco, and Walker, for games 3 and 4 there. I like the Mets starting pitching a bit better. I know that might sound a little crazy, but to me, I just like DeGrom and Scherzer, especially in a 5-game series. I'm going to give the nod here to the New York Mets when it comes to the starting pitching. Now, as for the bullpen, it's a bit of a weird situation here. The Dodgers have the number 1 bullpen on the year, and they're number 1 over the last 30 days. But when it comes to their closer, who's the closer? I mean, you got guys all over the place here that have basically stepped up to become an option to close games out, with Craig Kimbrell being taken out of the closer role. Someone like Evan Phillips, Chris Martin, these are guys that can strike a lot of guys out. But to me, I've said this on my live streams, who is the guy? To me, I'm all about roles in the bullpen. I want to know, where am I going to be pitching? What inning am I going to be pitching the most? Am I going to get the ball at the end of games? That, to me, I think it's important. I think it's a mentality kind of a thing. To me right now, the Mets, they got that guy at the end of games. You got Edwin Diaz. You got the trumpets. You know what you're getting at the end of the game. These guys know their roles in the bullpen. And while the Dodgers bullpen number-wise has been fantastic, number 1, I just am a little curious about what's going to happen here in the postseason Where are they going to be putting certain guys? You know, how's this going to shake up in the end? It's a bit of a question mark to me. Right now, I actually feel a little bit better about the Mets in this series. I don't know what it is. My gut is just telling me I like the Mets more. I like the top heaviness of the starting pitching in a 5-game series. I like that they have their roles a little more defined in the bullpen. And I think their offense can match up with the Dodgers. And I think their offense against that Dodgers starting pitching, it's not bad starting pitching, but I think they can get some runs across the board. I'm going with the Mets here going to the National League Championship Series. Last but not least, in the division round, we have the Cardinals and the Braves. I think this could be a tremendous series. The Cardinals, very solid. The Braves, last year's World Series champions, another very good team this year. Let's take a look here at the Atlanta Braves. We've already talked about the St. Louis Cardinals, but the Atlanta Braves, fantastic lineup, a ton of extension in this lineup. Ronald Acuna Jr., not his best season, but still a very good season overall. Dansby Swanson, this guy's going to get paid in the offseason, 25 homers. He's been one of the best defensive shortstops this year. Michael Harris, the second, probably going to win Rookie of the Year. At least in my opinion, I think he should win Rookie of the Year. Very good. Austin Riley, 38 home runs, quietly hitting 38 home runs this year. Matt Olson, a very solid addition to replace Freddie Freeman after he went to the Dodgers. Sure, some of these guys down here at the bottom of the lineup, not as effective. Marcell Ozuna, to me, a bit of a disappointment this year, but he is doing something. 23 home runs. He is there in the lineup. He's always a bit of a threat. When it comes to the starting pitching with the Atlanta Braves, love the starting pitching. Max Fried, Kyle Wright. Charlie Morton has been struggling a bit as of late, so I'm wondering what you're going to get here with the Charlie Morton. Don't forget about Spencer Strider. Went on the IL with the oblique, but that guy's got nasty stuff. If he's ready to go for the postseason, I think he could be a huge X factor, but you don't know what you're going to get with the Spencer Strider. You know, injured, first off, has the oblique. Obliques are very finicky. I'm just going to point that out. And then, you know, first postseason, what are you going to get out of a Spencer Strider, especially if you're going up against some very talented teams like the St. Louis Cardinals here? So let's focus our attention on the bullpen now. The Braves bullpen has been absolutely fantastic this year. Taking a look at the overall leaderboards on Fangraphs, second overall in relief pitching this year for the Braves, third overall in the last month. So let's focus on the St. Louis Cardinals here. The Cardinals, we talked about them earlier. We've had some guys go a little cold over the last month. Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, MVP candidates. I think they do find a way to heat up here. I think they use that Phillies series, really get themselves going. I think they're going to be fine. Pujols, what a great story he's been. Brendan Donovan, very underrated this year. Even someone like Lars Nootbaar has been pretty decent this year with a 340 on base. I like the Cardinals lineup. I do like the Braves a bit better, so I would give the advantage here to the Braves. But if we take a look at some numbers here, over the last week, St. Louis, like I said, I do think they are going to heat up. But if you take a look at the numbers over the last 7 days, 11th overall in WRC+, they're starting to show some signs here of heating up. But overall, the Braves, they've had a very, very good lineup this year. Actually, the Cardinals have had the better overall lineup this year when it comes to WRC+ compared to the Braves. But over the last 30 days, the Braves, they kept on hitting while the Cardinals were struggling. 17th overall over the last 30. The Braves were 8th overall in WRC+. But like I said, over the last week or so, the Cardinals have been starting to hit the ball a little bit more. Where I think this is going to be a big part of this series is the starting pitching. When you look at the rotations here, right off the bat, you got Adam Wainwright, you got Michaelis, you got Quintana, you got Montgomery as well. Don't forget about Jack Flaherty. You know, could he contribute in some kind of way? He hasn't been great since coming back, but he's been okay overall. When it comes to the Atlanta Braves, I like the starting pitching with the Atlanta Braves. Max Fried, Kyle Wright have had very good seasons this year. But I want to point this out when it comes to the starting pitching. The Atlanta Braves, 7th overall in starting pitching, but St. Louis is 16th. But again, I mentioned this earlier with St. Louis. They are not going to have flashy numbers when it comes to pitching because they're going to be utilizing the defense quite a bit. However, lately, Atlanta's starting pitching has been a little iffy. If we take a look here at Atlanta over the last 30 days, Strider, again, he did go down with an injury. Kyle Wright, those numbers are not looking all that great to me. A 5.26 ERA over his last 5 starts. A 4.17 FIP does show a little bit better projection moving forward, but still not amazing overall. Morton has struggled. at times over the last 5. So Max Fried, he has a 2.45 ERA, but the FIP is a little higher at around league average of 4.25. So Atlanta, when you look at Atlanta over the last month or so, 20th overall in starting pitching, while St. Louis, they keep on being steady, 14th overall. I think the starting pitching is going to be a lot closer than people might think. I love Adam Wainwright. I've always just been a big fan of him. Sure, he's never going to be, projections king, but the guy just finds a way to win ball games out there. Miles Mikolas, I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the Phillies series. I think he's very underrated this year. I think this is a guy, he goes out there, he competes. There's something about a Miles Mikolas that I just really like in the postseason. And then Quintana and Montgomery, I think those two guys, those were trade deadline additions. I think those guys can contribute in a big way. But I also want to go back to when these two teams were going up against each other during the season. And pointing this out here, St. Louis, head-to-head with these two teams, St. Louis actually had the better FIP overall against Atlanta. Atlanta had a 4.27 FIP, while St. Louis had a 3.77. St. Louis definitely had the higher ERA, but projection-wise, I like St. Louis's chances with the pitching overall. I definitely think you just shouldn't write them off when it comes to starting pitching. And then when it comes to the offense, one thing I noticed with St. Louis and Atlanta this year, they got Atlanta to get a lot of ground balls, almost 50% of the time, 47.4% ground balls to be exact. I think St. Louis, they're going to come out here and they're just going to play their game. They're going to get the ground balls. They're going to have their defense really getting involved here. And again, talking about the defense, the Cardinals, number 1 overall in UZR on the year. They're a very good defensive team. When you take a look at defensive runs saved, the Cardinals are 4th overall. The Braves, they're not bad either. They're 11th overall in defensive runs saved. When it comes to overall defense, the Cardinals are 3rd and the Braves are 18th. I think the Cardinals here, I think they're being a little overlooked. I think everyone loves the Braves right now, World Series champions. I'm just going to point this out. It's very hard to repeat as a World Series champion. I think the Cardinals here, they find a way to get this done. I think they're just going to go out there, they're going to play their game, and they're going to find a way to beat this Braves team in a very tough 5-game series. And in the end, we're going to have a 2006 NLCS rematch between the Mets and the Cardinals. Moving on to the American League Championship Series, we have the Blue Jays and the Guardians. Who would have thought this would have been the matchup, but here we are. This could be a very fun series. Let's go over which teams have advantages in different aspects of their teams. Taking a look at the offenses first. I've said this before, I love Cleveland's offense. Now, they're not the best offense overall, but I like that these guys can do different things. I love Jose Ramirez. I love Steven Kwan at the top of the lineup. Oscar Gonzalez has been a very nice contributor this year. Andres Jimenez has been a complete player this year. When it comes to offense, I got to give the edge to the Blue Jays here. They just got offense for days. They got bats for days. They got thump all over this lineup. 5 different guys with at least 24 home runs. I mean, that is just nasty. I'm definitely leaning towards the Blue Jays when it comes to the offense. When it comes to the starting pitching, we talked earlier about Shane Bieber, Tristan McKenzie, Cal Quantrill. I think these guys are being slept on a bit. And also, I would argue, too, that Alek Manoah and Kevin Gausman have been slept on a little, too. This is a really good 1-2 punch. And then you got Ross Stripling behind them. Jose Barrios could be an X factor in this postseason. When it comes to starting pitching, I am going to lean towards the Toronto Blue Jays just because I just like that 1-2 punch of Gausman and Manoah a bit better. I do like Bieber, but Tristan McKenzie, what would he be able to really, I don't know, when I see him against the Toronto Blue Jays with that lineup, I don't know. I could see Bieber being able to hold his own, but McKenzie, I don't know. I think McKenzie could do something, but I think the Blue Jays offense would be a little too much for him. Cal Quantrill, he can definitely go out there and he could put up a surprise start against the Blue Jays, but again, that offense, I just like the Blue Jays offense that much. When it comes to the bullpens, you got to give the advantage to the Cleveland Guardians. I mean, this bullpen, I've already mentioned this a couple of times. This bullpen has just been nasty all year. However, I do like the Blue Jays bullpen as well. If we go take a look at some numbers here, as of late, Toronto, 15th overall when it comes to relief pitching. But I did mention this earlier. They've been having to pick up a lot for the starting pitching, a lot of innings thrown over the last month. I think Manoah, Gausman, Guys like Stripling, and even Barrios, if you put him in the bullpen as well, that'll take a little pressure off that bullpen. If you can come out of the bullpen as a long reliever, give some innings out of that bullpen, I think that could be really helpful. So I expect Toronto, with some of these guys here, you got some guys that are studs. Jordan Romano, I think, is an underrated guy in this postseason. He's been one of the better closers this year. I think Toronto, they got guys here that can do different things. You got a couple of lefties in here. Who knows? Maybe even Yusei Kikuchi. He's actually been pretty good out of the bullpen as of late. I think he could step up and be a big piece. But you ended up getting Anthony Bass at the deadline. I like some of these pieces for the Toronto Blue Jays. And it's not the best bullpen, but I think they can do enough to get it done. I mean, look at the Washington Nationals back in 2019. Did not have a good bullpen that year, but they put the right guys in the right situations in that postseason. I could see a similar thing going on here with the Toronto Blue Jays. The thing is, though, is they got guys that can come out here of this bullpen and they can get some things done. In the end, I think the Blue Jays just are going to be a little too much for the Guardians. I think that offense is just going to be too much. I think they have good starting pitching. And while I love the Guardians bullpen, I just think in the end, the Guardians, they're just not going to have enough offense. They're not going to be able to do as well with the starting pitching. They can definitely pitch out of that bullpen, but I think the Blue Jays will have enough to be able to get it done. The Blue Jays will move on to the World Series. Moving on to the National League Championship Series, we have a rematch of the 2006 NLCS, the Mets and the Cardinals. We all know how that one turned out. The Cardinals moving on to the World Series and beating the Tigers in the World Series. Can that happen again? We'll have to wait and see. But let's take a look here. I've already looked over the two teams. I've already looked at the Cardinals. I've already looked at the Mets. So let's just go over which teams have strengths. For the offenses, I actually think these offenses are pretty even, honestly. The Cardinals have been cold, but they have been heating up lately coming into the postseason, heating up at the right time. The Mets, even without Marte, they've been pretty steady overall. Really like the Mets lineup as well. To be honest, I would say they're pretty even overall. I would say Goldschmidt and Arenado, those are two impact bats for the Cardinals. And while for the Mets, you got Lindor, McNeil, and Alonso in the middle there. So I would probably say it's pretty even overall. If we take a look at the overall leaderboards when it comes to offense, the Cardinals were 5th in WRC plus, and the Mets were just a little bit ahead of them, 3rd overall. Taking a look at the starting pitching, I definitely think you have to lean towards the Mets starting pitching here when it comes to games 1 and 2, DeGrom and Scherzer. But again, I've mentioned this with the Cardinals. I do like Wainwright and Michaelis. I like Quintana. I like Montgomery here. Flaherty is there as well. I think in a 7-game series, I think the Cardinals, they're doing pretty well for themselves here. In a shorter series, I do like the Mets, and you do have Bassett and Carrasco as well. But Carrasco's been pretty cold. Bassett's been pretty cold as well. Walker has actually been better out of all three. So in the end, I like the Mets when it comes to the top heaviness, but for depth, I like the Cardinals a little bit more, so I guess you could call that even as well. When it comes to the bullpens overall, I definitely think you have to lean towards the Mets here. If we take a look at the overall relief pitching Fangraph WAR, the Mets overall 11th, while St. Louis is 17th. Now, if you take a look recently, the Mets are 9th overall, while St. Louis is 23rd. But again, when it comes to St. Louis's pitching, even with the starting pitching, they don't necessarily tend to rank all that well, just because you're not getting a lot of guys with strikeouts because they utilize the defense so much. With the Cardinals, they have a 3.28 ERA over the last month, while the Mets have a 3.20. So that is pretty close. Now, the Mets, they definitely have the better FIP, a 2.78 over the last month, while the Cardinals are a 4.03. So, and taking a look, when it comes to the defense, this is where I think this series could be determined. I think these two teams are, even though record-wise, the Mets have a much better record than the Cardinals, I think these two teams are pretty even. The Mets also did play the Cardinals pretty well, but hey, this is postseason baseball we're talking about here. When it comes to postseason baseball, the most important thing that I think gets left off the table, sure, we look at offense, sure, we look at the starting pitching, the top guns out of the bullpen, but when it comes to winning baseball teams, you got to play defense out there. You got to play fundamental baseball. The Cardinals have been one of the best defensive teams all year. 70 defensive runs saved, a 42.0 UZR. When it comes to the Mets, they are doing pretty okay with defensive runs saved, 11 overall, but a negative 7.3 UZR. They've done other things in other areas to make up, to give them a decent ranking overall. But when it comes to the Cardinals, they are just so good out there. They make the routine plays. They make the athletic plays out there. And I think that's going to be the difference in this series. I think the Cardinals, they're just going to be the better team. Maybe not talent-wise in some areas, but I think the Cardinals, they're just going to be better prepared in this series. I like the Cardinals moving on to the World Series to go against the Blue Jays. And for the World Series, I have the Blue Jays against the Cardinals. This was my preseason pick, and I'm going to stick with it. Let's talk about the offenses first. We just talked about St. Louis. I think with St. Louis, I love their lineup, but the Blue Jays, I love their lineup just as much. I think you got more oomph in this lineup overall. I do love me some Goldschmidt and Arenado, along with Pujols in the DH spot, Donovan up there as well. But Toronto, they just got guys that can hit for days. I like the Toronto Blue Jays when it comes to the starting pitching. When it comes to a 7-game series, like I mentioned with the Mets, I like the Cardinals in a longer series. I think they have more depth here. They have more options that they can turn to. Michaelis has been pitching great. Quintana has actually been pitching great. I didn't mention that in the Mets series, but he's been pitching really well. Wainwright is as much of a pro as they come. You got Flaherty, who came back recently. Could he be an X factor? I definitely think he could be. Montgomery hasn't been great as of late, but he definitely was pitching really well when he first came to the Cardinals. Overall, I like the Cardinals' depth. I do like the 1-2 punch of a Manoah and a Gausman along with a Stripling, but I think the Cardinals, they got more options here. So again, I guess you could call this, pretty even overall. Again, like with the Mets, I like the 1-2 punch of the Blue Jays, but I like the depth overall of the Cardinals. So I guess you can just call it even. When it comes to the bullpens, overall, I'd say these bullpens are pretty even, but with the bullpen for the Cardinals, I like some of these guys, man. When you got someone like a Ryan Helsley who has just been shutting it down at the end of games, struggling a little bit recently, but man, this guy has just been top notch this year. Gallegos has been really good in the setup role. Like me some Jordan Hicks there. Obviously he has been having some injuries, but I just love the velocity on a Jordan Hicks. But he will be back for the postseason. Not great numbers overall, but again, I keep mentioning X factor. When you got a guy just throwing as hard as he's throwing, man, I do like me some Jordan Hicks. You got Steven Matz in this bullpen as well. This is a guy that's been a bit forgotten about. But coming out of the bullpen, a 3.78 FIP compared to the 5.25 ERA. I think Steven Matz, that gives you a little bit of depth there for the bullpen. But for the Blue Jays, I definitely think they got some options here as well. We mentioned Jordan Romano earlier. I like me some Jordan Romano. But when it comes to other aspects of the bullpen, I definitely think the Blue Jays, again, I did mention, prior, I think in the playoffs, I think the starting pitching will be able to take a bit of pressure off of this bullpen. But in the end, when I'm looking at the two bullpens, I like the Cardinals a little bit more overall. I do like some of the pieces here with the Blue Jays, but when you're comparing the two, I do like the Cardinals. But I'm going to point one more thing out. I looked at this earlier when it came to the Mets. The Cardinals, to me, I think they're just a better defensive team. And I think when it comes to championship winning teams, you got to go out there and you got to play some good defense. The Cardinals, one of the best defenses in Major League Baseball this year. The Blue Jays, 13th overall in defense. They're more of a defensive run save team, but look at the negative 32.5 UZR. That is second to last in Major League Baseball. I think in the end, that comes back to bite them. And I think the Cardinals, in the end, they're just going to be the better prepared team. They're just going to be the better team overall. I got the Cardinals winning the World Series. So those are my picks for the playoffs this year. Tell me how terrible you think they are down below, but that's all I have for right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.